Okay, kids, it's time for another episode of the Fueled by Weird podcast, the only podcast for whom the bell tolls. I'm Chris Daly, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with the very talented Jamal Igle. Jamal, how's it going, man?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. All right, so usually when we kick these things off, I like to do it with a little bit of an icebreaker. So this week's question is, would you rather sit through a Star Wars marathon or a Lord of the Rings marathon?
Ooh, Star Wars marathon. Chris, honestly, I kid you not. I fell asleep during every Lord of the Rings movie,
You know
like
what?
snoring hard in the theater.
I'm glad you mentioned that because first of all, I would also pick Star Wars,
Mm,
and it's actually for the same reason. So I used to work at a movie theater, um,
hmm
and so I'd get into movies for free. And so one time we just happened to, it was when the very first one came out. So this is dating myself years ago.
Right.
Um, Not even very far, and I fell right asleep. And it's nothing against the franchise or anything. I'm a big, fantasy person. I love all
hmm
that kind of stuff. Just those movies just aren't for me, man. So I kudos though those of you out there who can. I'm not hating on them at all. They just weren't for me.
Oh no, I completely get it. The thing is, for me, it's I'm not a huge sword and sorcery fan
Ah,
personally, and the once they started speaking Elvish, like my brain just shut off. It was just like, nope, I'm out.
and
Have fun.
you were even better than me. I only made it to the first one. I tried a couple times, just kept falling asleep, and I've never actually even attempted to watch any of the other ones. I'm just like, I tried the one. I'm good.
Mhm.
I'm out.
Well, no, you know what it is you've got friends. You know how it is, especially back in the day. Like everybody, you know, it's going to the theater. We're all gonna go see Lord of the Rings, man. It's gonna be
Yeah.
great. I'm just like, guys, you remember me like sawing logs as soon as Arwen and Aragorn started professing their love for each other? I'm just like, no, I couldn't. I couldn't. My brain just could not handle it. So
No, I get you. I actually have a friend who every New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, they'll follow the whole like
oh yeah.
Hobbit meals, and they'll watch all the movies with like the same
Yeah.
directors. Kind of like, man, bravo to you. That's a cool, it's cool you have a tradition. That's rad,
Mm.
but that's just, yeah, I can't get into it.
Almost as annoying as being forced to watch Alice's Restaurant on repeat during Thanksgiving for years by my friends, but
Oh man.
not quite.
I get it. I get it. All right. So, the whole concept of the show Fueled by Weird is basically the things you're into, the things that you do, when you're just trying to have fun or just do the
Mhm.
self-care stuff. That's the stuff that fuels who you are and, essentially what fuels your weird. So, what kind of things are you into? What stuff fuels your weird?
Ooh, I guess like the big one is professional wrestling.
Oh,
Like
dude.
I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. Started watching, AWA way back in the 80s. And then when WWF came on, Saturday night's main event, was watching that. Took a break probably right around the time The Rock first started getting popular and and Stone Cold were getting popular in WWE, and then came back for the Monday Night Wars. And now I watch a little bit of everything, watch a little WWE, watch a lot of AEW,
Oh,
watch a lot of New Japan, trying to keep up with like MLW and Impact and all the other like going to check out like live shows, smaller promotions, like smaller local promotions when I can. But that's I think that's like right now that's probably like the biggest thing, outside of like, a little bit of like toy collecting and spending time with my family. But and yeah, I'm like it's it's pretty it's pretty fierce. Like it really
dude.
is.
I'm right. So first of all, I just have to say this smile on my face is because I think we just became best friends. I've been a huge wrestling fan since I want to say around 96, 97,
Mhm.
kind of when Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold were kind of getting
Right.
with Mike Tyson. And
Right.
I kind of just have been there ever since. I've had friends come and go and drop out, but I've kind of just been fairly consistent. And now, like
Mm,
you said, with like same with you, I watch some WWE, huge AEW guy. Matter of fact, I
mm.
was just trying to get caught up on Collision from last night, a little bit
Oh
of
yeah, yeah,
today.
yeah.
I watch so much AEW. I think I'm and like you, I almost watch nothing other than wrestling because there's just so much of it, and I'm trying to keep
Right.
with as much as I can. But yeah, Ben, I'm huge wrestling fan. Matter of fact, I was gonna say I'm wearing a wrestling shirt today, but it's one
Mm,
of the rare times that I'm not wearing because that's most of my clothes is just pro wrestling shirts.
right.
Yeah, toy collecting for me too, and then
Mm.
family time. But yeah, definitely very, very, very big into pro wrestling. So we might have to have you come back and have a whole other conversation about that because
Oh, absolutely.
all
Absolutely.
the
Like I've literally, because I'm in New York, so I have literally been to every AEW Grand Slam at
oh,
Arthur Ashe Stadium.
bro.
Like great seats, like, you know, upper deck, but like lower upper deck, like with an entire view of the stage,
Oh,
like front
God.
row, like just I don't know. The last time I went with like Ian Levinstein from Comic Timing.
I don't.
He's another pod. It's another podcast, and I pop up on that show. And Ian and I have been friends for like 15 years, something like that.
Right on.
But he's part of like this little group of people that every Grand Slam we've all like we get 4 seats, we go, we have a great time, stay through like the entire night. I get home at like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh man. Especially that one with Eddie Kingston and Claudia. I would have
Oh,
loved.
that was
Oh
great.
my God, dude.
The pop in the arena was insane. I still
Oh,
have to say one of my favorite moments is Kenny Omega Brian Danielson, because
oh my
when
God.
Kenny did that first B trigger
Yeah.
from the stage and
Yeah.
hit
Yeah.
Brian against the post and Brian started twitching,
Yeah.
like we were in like we were like in the arena, like Brian was like, oh my God, he killed him. It's like the sell was so good
Yeah.
from Brian, like people don't get like how good Brian Danielson is. Like
So
it
good.
just I try to explain, and you're a wrestling fan, so you
Oh
understand.
yeah.
So you try to explain like the theatricality of wrestling
Mhm.
to people. And I I used to tell one of my French teachers, because he's an actor, and every time I start talking about wrestling is like, oh yeah, well, you like wrestling is fake. It's like, it's not fake, it's predetermined, but it's no more fake than what you do on stage.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
but just like trying to communicate those ideas to people about the combination of theatricality and pure sportsmanship. The amount of training that these guys do. It's and trying to explain to people that there are storylines. You get into who these people are because it's because of their personalities. The personalities are larger than life. I mean, and that's if you've ever seen like wrestler Twitter, like whenever there's like a comic Twitter, especially like whenever like there's a wrestling on,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people start talking, like comic book creators love wrestling, and I think that a lot of it is the overlap with what
Yeah.
we do. There's a lot of similarities between the
Sure.
two in terms of storytelling. We're trying to convey that sense of drama to people. We're trying to get across in a primarily visual medium. We're trying to tell stories
Yeah.
that keep people invested. And so I feel the same way about professional wrestling.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, when I started out, I was, my dad is kind of the reason that I'm, as nerdy as I am today. And he
Right.
started me off on comic books.
Right.
One day I just happened to come across wrestling and it was like, holy shit, this is like a comic book, but in real life. This is incredible.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's kind of what brought me in. So yeah, I think a lot of that. I don't I think there are more comic book creators that are fans than there aren't fans because
True.
you don't see very out there. I agree with you. I think there are quite a few that are, And I definitely can see the similarity because, you've also got a lot of wrestlers who are
Mhm.
comic book fans. So I think
Right.
that meshes really well.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, we could talk all day, especially
I
about
know.
all the new Okada stuff, big business next week. It would be super
Oh
awesome.
yeah.
But we'll have, like I said, we'll have to become best friends on Facebook or whatever,
Okay.
and we'll have to talk about this another day. Um, what I do want to talk about before we get off track is
Mhm.
you being an artist. I kind of want to talk about, going back to talk about what got you into, art, what got you interested in art and what
Mhm.
got you to want to pursue art in the first place.
Okay. Well, I mean, the thing that got me into it originally, because I as a kid, you know, I'm you know, I'm a kid of the 70s. So, when I was a kid, we had all like the Sid and Marty Croft stuff on the air, like Bigfoot and Wild Boy and Electro Woman and Dyna Girl. And then they were showing, you had, the Incredible Hulk TV series, you had the $6 Million Man, you had Batman and reruns, you had
Yeah.
like this, and then going into the 80s, you had stuff like, the Bionic Woman and the Greatest American Hero. And so there was always like, all this like comic book stuff around me. And my mom was always very encouraging. Uh as far as like whatever like artistic stuff kind of I would ended up being drawn towards. I think like if I have like that pinpoint origin moment, it's when my grandfather took me to see Superman the movie.
Nice.
That's I was 5. So
Wow.
if you could imagine something having such a huge imprint that you spend a good portion of your career just chasing the opportunity to draw the character,
For sure.
you know? So that I think that was probably like that was the first thing. Because I had seen like, the adventures of Superman on television, but to have that, have Superman as a character, particularly portrayed by Christopher Reeve, like to have it be on celluloid in such a, large format for a 5-year-old, and the moment, because we got there late, and the moment that I walked into the theater was when he hears the hypersonic signal from Lex Luthor
Oh,
and
wow.
dives out the Daily Planet window and transforms into Superman.
Yeah,
And I grabbed my grandfather's arm. I was like, I want to do that.
yeah.
I didn't know what that was, but I
Yeah.
knew that that's what I wanted. So after that, I just became, primarily obsessed with superheroes at first,
Yeah.
but then really like as the years went on, becoming more and more obsessed with comics and trying to draw comics. And I really can't think of a time when when comics and the idea of working in comics hadn't been a part of my life, you know especially something that I wanted to dedicate my life to doing, creatively. uh, so yeah, I mean that's like the biggest thing. I think that really drove me more than anything else. It still drives me because I've had opportunities to do other things. I've worked in advertising, I've worked in television, I've designed characters for small projects and big projects. And every time I got out of I worked in TV animation. Like every time I got out of doing comics, something always drew me back. So here I am, 35 years later, still working in comics, still creating comics, still doing, cool stuff, trying to do cool stuff anyway.
Yeah, and that's really cool, because everyone says you always have to have your one thing and you have to be good
Mhm.
at one thing. But it's
Right.
like I never really understood that because it's like, there's so many things I want to try and do.
Right.
That's kind of why they coined the term, jack of all trades, master of
Hmm.
none, where I don't want to be good at one thing. I want to go and try a bunch of things. So that's really cool that you've gotten that opportunity to try so many different avenues, but it sounds like
Oh,
definitely comics is the one that Just when they think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of it was always sort of a circular route.
Yeah.
I think there was a time when I was trying to avoid it. Um, and not for any other reason than, you know, when I was a kid, one of the other things that I was doing is I was acting
Oh, okay.
and, I was performing. And I really sort of I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it
Mm,
the way that I love working in comics and the way that I get excited when I see my name in print. I get excited when I see my work in print.
that's cool.
It's still very cool to me to like to open a book and see my work in print, or to walk into a comic shop and see trades of my work on the shelves. I get, there's a little endorphin rush
Yeah, I
that comes
bet.
from that. Yeah.
That's cool.
And yeah, and I've had, like I said, I've had opportunities to do other things, and I'm always grateful for those opportunities.
Sure.
But comics, definitely, it's the first love, creative love, is comics.
Plus, with those other opportunities, there's always something you can grab from that and bring back and maybe even
Oh
improve
yeah,
the
absolutely,
process. Something,
absolutely.
always something new to learn.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I try to convey to my students as well is that being a comic book artist is, it's exactly that, the jack of all trades sort of mentality. Is you have to have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of different things, a lot of different areas,
Yeah.
even things that you would not even realize will come in handy at some point down the line. You just, you kind of hold on to it until you need it. And then, when the right project comes, you dig into that well and you go, hey, all right, I know a little bit about this. Let me do a little bit more research and really kind of, bone up. It's like I know way more about guns than I should ever possibly know. It's a little frightening
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's again, it's part of the process. Is it's you know knowing a little bit about architecture, knowing a little bit about scenic design and costume design and lighting, you know, film directing, and then various, like I had to look up for a scene in The Wrong Earth. I had to look up brutalist architecture versus Gothic architecture and old abandoned mental institutions.
Oh, man. That kind of just goes back to that jack of all trades, master of
Oh
none.
yeah,
You know,
absolutely,
the curse of
absolutely.
a creator is there's just a lot of just random stuff that that there's no really good reason why you should know that. You just do.
It makes Trivial Pursuit very interesting sometimes because you just kind of go,
Yeah, I bet.
yeah, I know a little bit.
Core memory unlocked.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
That's awesome. All right, so I've kind of looked at your resume of stuff, and you've got, like we mentioned, quite a bit
Mm.
to your name. With established IPs and IPs that you've created yourself. Um, what's the kind of mindset, going into a creator-owned IP versus, one that's already been, very well established? Do you have to kind of treat those differently? Do you really have, I mean, I guess for lack of a better term, do you have a better, or do you have a preference as to which one you like doing? Does it kind of just take them all as they come?
Well, they're different muscles.
Okay,
When you're working on an established IP, I don't know if this is true for everyone. I can only really speak for myself.
sure.
Whenever I work on a project, I feel like there needs to be some sense of personal ownership of
Okay,
those characters. But it's in different ways. When you're working on a
sure.
corporate IP, when you're working on somebody else's characters, you are a shepherd for that character, for the time that you're working on that character, because you know that at a certain point you're going to have to hand that character off to other creators. So there's a saying in comics which is you can break the toys, but you have to put them back together before you hand them off. So in that regard, you can do whatever you want with the characters, but they have to be reset to their basic status quo when you're done,
Mhm.
unless the other creator decides to pick up those threads that you've already laid in and run with it. Some creators like to do that. Others want a clean slate to work from. Let's reset everything so that I can start from zero and I can tell my story the way that I wanted to tell it. When you are creating characters, you are the arbitrator of everything that happens from conception until completion. Nobody can tell you how these characters can be drawn because you're the one who's drawing these characters. Nobody can tell you how these characters are supposed to be written because you're the one writing these characters. You get to determine their fate. You get to determine who they are and what makes them tick. And they're both this there's a discovery process with both, but one is when you're working on other people's characters, it's more about finding your version of that character that works for you, that still that's still within the confines of what the IP owner wants, as opposed to finding ideas that you want to continue to work on and develop. And if you're on something long enough, or you work on something long enough, you every issue, every page becomes a tweak. You're slowly perfecting something over a very long period of time. Or perfecting's the wrong word. You're getting closer to that, I guess, that sort of idealized version of the character, because it's like sculpture. It's like
Yeah.
sculpting with clay. you know if you're sculpting with clay, as long as the clay doesn't harden, you can mess with it as much as you want to. You can rework things as much as you need to. You can slap more clay on, you can take more clay off. You're finding what works and what doesn't work. And when you're doing creator owned projects, that it's that freedom that you long for, that you search for. When you're working on established IPs, depending on the IP, there may be some leeway where you can do whatever, and then there's those projects where you have to stick very strictly to what's already been established. So those are the differences, really.
That's good to know. And like you were saying with that, being able to adjust the clay, for every news story you tell, you uncover more and more of who's at the root of that character.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, with a lot of your pre-established IPs that you've been able to be a part of, did you get to bring your own stories to that and tell a story that you want to tell, or was there maybe one that was kind of dictated by, the company saying, we kind of want to hit these story points, but it's up to you how we get there?
Well, no, because the thing is, it's like usually if I'm like the stuff that I've worked on for like DC or Dark Horse or whoever, like established characters, I'm usually working with other writers. So unless a writer comes to me and asks my opinion, I usually let them handle that part.
Sure.
Uh, because it gives me more freedom to just concentrate on the art. And because the thing is you have to make the editor happy and you have to make the publisher happy
Sure.
before
Of
you
course.
can please any fan.
Hmm.
um but you also have to make yourself happy with the work that you're doing and feel like the work that you're doing is the best work that you can do, that you're presenting your point of view within the stricture of this established brand. because that's ultimately when you're working for a DC Comics. I mean, that's more, it's brand management
Sure.
more than anything else. You are a link in a very long chain. It's a chain that's going to continue after you've left the characters. So while you're working on the characters, you know, you, you kind of have to operate in sort of a Hippocratic oath kind of way. Do no harm
Okay.
or do no
Yeah.
long term, unless it's something that the company decides that they want to keep around. But usually, like I said, going back to the, you can break it, but you got to put it back together. Usually you get, these characters have to be reset for a variety of reasons.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
No problem.
that makes sense. So switching gears over to creator owned
Mhm.
IPs, I want to talk about, the main event, Dudley Datson and the Forever Machine. So I was able to read the Comixology version. Dude, that story was incredible. That was
Oh, thanks.
one of the ones I'm so super stoked about for this year.
Thank
Um,
you.
for those that don't know, do you want to tell a little bit about Dudley and his story?
Sure. So Dudley Datson the Forever Machine is about a 15-year-old genius who has invented a a version of smart clothing that does miraculous things, but doesn't quite work the way he wants it to. But Dudley ends up being caught in this millennia long conspiracy where he has to protect a watch and a talking dog named Phyllis from the forces of evil. And as things unfold, you you get a very, it's hard to describe. It's a YA adventure story about a young black protagonist, and it's probably, I mean, it really is like one of the most fun things that I've been involved in. It's, and again, when we talk about like creator owned versus working on somebody else's IP, this is one of these projects that I, along with Scott Snyder, my co-creator on
Yeah.
this, we were able to build from the ground up. I mean, with Dudley Datson, like I designed everything. I even designed the logo of the book.
It's a fantastic logo, by the way.
Thanks.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
speaking of Mr. Snyder, how did this all come together where you guys came together and said, "Hey, let's make a book together"? How did that start?
So Scott and I have actually known each other for like, oh my God, for forever.
That's
And we
cool.
we met at a signing at the old St. Mark's Comics back in the day. This was like just as American Vampire was starting,
Oh wow,
and
okay.
yeah, and apparently I was very kind to him. Um,
That's good.
which is good,
Yeah.
but we stayed in touch, and we would, when we were both at DC, we would see each other in the hallway and say hi, and we, there were a couple of different things that had come up that we tried to work together on and just could never come together, but you know we stayed friendly. And then I'd see, the usual, like you see him at conventions, and you talk a little bit, and then I kept seeing his star rise and rise and rise. And I mean, literally like one of my favorite writers in comics.
Oh, for sure.
And he reached out to me when they were putting together all the Scott Snyder books when he was over at Comixology, and he actually presented me with two different projects.
Hmm.
And one ended up being the book that he did with Hayden Sherman, and the
Okay.
other was Dudley. And I picked Dudley because I felt like Dudley was more my speed, my aesthetic.
Okay.
It was the opportunity to, you know, to do some like let's do some great design work, and you know, and contribute to the story. And like I said, like, you know, the build, of of the book was one of like the smoothest things. If you know, Scott is, you know, Scott is a absolute pro, you know, and he knows how to keep a story moving and fun. And the opportunity to not just work with him on a project, but to, the opportunity to see how his mind works as a writer, you know, was a little bit of an education for me as well. Something that I like to think that I'm carrying over into my own writing. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, but like the entire thing was just like, he told me the idea. I said, absolutely. We started putting everything together. Like the amount of faith and trust that he gave me can't even be quantified. Like, I got to pick my team, like my creative team, working with Juan Castro, who I've been working with for 13 years now as my anchor
Oh, wow.
on most of my projects. And then Chris Sotomayor, who's one of the best colorists in comics, and we've been friends forever. And Tom Napolitano, you know, it's just been like, it was cool. Like, it was cool and it was fun. And, it's just like, it's just the challenge for me ended up being like, how do I top myself? Like, how do I make each page better? Like, how they like, what can I come up with, you know, and pitch? And like, there's the page with the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, that wasn't supposed to be a roller coaster. I pitched the roller coaster.
That was awesome.
um, but it again, it's just like, and then there was also the challenge of it all, because I never, it's the first time I've ever done a project where I had to draw animals like consistently,
Yeah.
especially a corgi. Like, corgis are hard, man. Corgis are hard to draw. It took a little while to kind of figure out how to make the structure work. And but again, like drawing dogs and making them, expressive, and making them move, and and everything. Like, it was just fun. It was just fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I could definitely tell you guys had a lot of fun,
Oh
especially,
yeah.
you would think with a corgi, they're pretty simple. You wouldn't think that they'd be so tough, but that's
No.
interesting that they turned out to
They-
be.
yeah, no, it's just they've got like, there's like this weird curve to their back going up to the head, and it doesn't quite. It's sort of like if you took like a German Shepherd's head and put it on a Chihuahua.
Okay. That's awesome. And then especially, the conversion from corgi to battle dog, of course.
Oh
That,
yes,
I'm
yes,
sure was,
absolutely. Oh
yeah.
yeah, no, that was, I was holding on to that one.
That was surprising. I'm not going to spoil too much for the people who haven't read it yet, but that was pretty insane. I liked it. So with, the idea of Dudley, was there any specific inspirations or anything you guys drew off of to come up with the idea, or any even like the character designs or anything like that?
Well, okay. So, well, particularly with the design of Dudley, like, I wanted him to feel modern. And I've got a 16-year-old.
Okay.
And
Me
as I
too.
was, yeah, and
Yeah.
as I was sketching out the look that I wanted for Dudley, and like really just like looking at their friends and looking at their classmates and seeing how like kids are dressing and
Yeah.
everything. And and I showed it to Rio, and said, does this look like somebody you'd be going to school with? And they were like, absolutely. Like the absolutely.
Nice.
So, that was like, that was a big part of it. The other part of it was because the story is set in New York, I really wanted to make it sort of like a love letter to New York City. And there's a lot of little things, a lot, real streets that I use for reference, real elements from New York history and world history. But also looking at like, you know, and a lot of different things like the chemical society headquarters is based off of this elaborate underground museum structure in Europe that I found photos of online, and I use that as sort of like the base,
That's cool.
for that. And even like, you know there's a scene. I don't want to really spoil too much for people that, if you haven't read it already, on Comixology, that's coming out from Dark Horse next month, actually,
Month.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah. But there's I found like one of the earliest experiments in building an actual exoskeleton, like a working exoskeleton,
Oh,
and went
wow.
and found the plans online
Oh,
and used that in the book.
that's cool.
So, like on almost everything in the book when it comes to like invention, these are all real inventions. These are all like my morgue file, and just like, you for inventions, it's probably like almost a gig and a half,
Oh,
like
wow.
of JPEGs and blueprints for things.
That's
So,
cool.
because a lot of what Dudley Datson is about the history of invention, and part of it is about celebrating the history of invention and inventors. Um, I really wanted to make sure that my research was on point.
That's cool. Very, very cool. So, we've talked about, it started off on Comixology and now it's coming to Dark Horse for the first time in print.
Yes.
Um, how did that come around? Where, did you guys kind of take it and shop it out to other places, or did they come calling asking for it? How did that go?
Oh no. Comixology, they have a deal with Dark Horse, so all the
Oh, okay.
Comixology original books go to Dark Horse. So that was already part of
Oh,
the
okay.
package. We
Very
had
convenient.
before, I think there was some discussion early on about taking the book to Image,
Okay.
but especially at the time, because he was doing the book with Charles Soule, the uh what's the name of that book? Like the with the aliens, like the United States or something. He had,
Oh,
he had,
yeah.
you know, he had a
Yeah.
couple of other things going on in
Yeah.
Image, and he didn't want to have Scott didn't want to have all of his books at one publisher at
Sure.
the time. So, working with Comixology and then having to deal, because Comixology already had their deal with Dark Horse. It just made it easier.
That's cool. That's super convenient. So, from what I understand, they're going to take the five original Comixology issues and kind of just combine them into three. Is that how it's working?
Yes, yes. So because the first two issues are normal comic size, and then issues 3 and 4, like I think issue 4, if I remember correct, was like 19 pages,
And
but
it's a
then
little
issue
shorter, I
5
think.
is like almost 40 pages.
Yeah,
So so if you put them all to if you move the page count around, it all just kind of makes sense. So
that makes sense. Well,
yeah.
I'm super excited for it. I mean, like I said, I love the book. I'm excited to get it in print because, sometimes, like Stan Lee says, print's never going to go away because
This is true.
it's nice to see it on the screen, but it's nice to hold it in your hand as
Oh
well.
no, absolutely. And I and
So,
I know that there are a lot of I know that there are a lot of people who are, like us, they are more fans of print than they are digital. I do read some digital comics, but I would
yeah,
prefer to have stuff in print. So I know there are a lot of people who hadn't read it on Comixology who are looking forward to picking it up in print. And it's going to be an oversized format, and it's going to be, you know, three, double-sized comics. So, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm happy about all of that.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, I know it's coming out as a 3-issue set.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't want to spoil anything, but the ending of it was left very open-ended. Do you guys have plans for more? Is that something you guys have talked about? Was it kind
It
of just
is
a wrapped up story?
No, it is something that we've talked about. One of the it's a great problem to have,
Sure.
but it's a when it comes to wanting to do follow-ups on things, it makes it very difficult. Scott is Scott and I am me, and we have multiple projects going on over the course of multiple years.
Sure.
I'm currently working on the Wrong Earth. Then I've got another project coming right after that, and then I've got another creator-owned project that I'm doing right after that. So we have like started talking about it, and then Scott's doing Scott stuff. Scott's writing television animation and doing comics, and doing his thing. So at some point I would love to get back to doing more Dudley, because I think there's definitely, especially like you were saying, there is an entire universe of stories that could be told with these characters.
For sure. And like you said, time is enemy of all of us. If we just had an unlimited amount of it, there's so much stuff you could do, but
This is true. This is true.
only so much you can do. But so that's cool. I'm excited that, for the possibility of more Dudley for sure. And like you mentioned, you said you had some more stuff in the hopper. Is there anything you can talk about yet that you want to talk about?
Well, we've got the Wrong Earth Dead Ringers, which the first issue is coming out next week. I think it's coming out in March.
Okay.
Uh, that's 5 issues, and
Yeah.
that's coming out from Ahoy Comics. And then I can't talk about the other things that I'm
Okay.
doing just
Fair
yet,
enough.
but there will probably be an announcement, at least of one of them, probably around San Diego this year.
Ah, nice.
So
All right. Well, we will circle back to that here shortly, but what I want to do is ask you one more thing before I let you go.
sure.
Um, Final thought, I usually like to end this with, having the person I talk to throw out a little bit of advice for
Mhm.
up and coming creators or creators that maybe just haven't got started yet, or, just any advice you'd give a creator.
Oh, okay. So comics are hard, and just like any other path, which is not the traditional path. It's there's you know you want to feel like your work is fully formed when you're first getting into the business, but that's never really the case, because it takes time to build up the muscle to do work consistently and to do it well. And you're constant, especially if you're a young creator, you're still growing. So the advice that I usually give people, I try to give my students, I try to give people, when I'm like reviewing portfolios or just in general, is, you know, be patient with yourself. You know, it's a tough business.
Sure.
There's going to be a lot of obstacles. And as creatives, we tend to be harder on ourselves than anybody else will be. So you have to learn to be patient with yourself and understand that you're constantly going to be growing and changing as a creative person, and you're constantly going to be learning new things every single day. You're going to be incorporating those things into your work every single day. So there's going to be this evolution that happens, but it's going to take time, because evolution takes time.
Sure.
You know, the you that you are right this moment will not be the same artist or even the same person that you may be 5, 10, 15 years from now. So if you learn to be patient with yourself now, and understand that you are bringing to the world what you are capable of doing right this very moment. Don't worry about what other people are doing. You know, worry about what you're doing. Do the best work that you can do, and be patient with yourself and understand that you will grow, you will change, you will get better, but it's going to take time.
For sure. That's good advice. And I really like what you said at the start where um don't try to hold on to something until it's fully formed and put it out into the world, because I have a lot of friends that have done that where they'll tell me they have this idea and I'm like, that's a
Mm-hmm.
great idea. Where can I find it? Where can I get it? Well, it's
Right.
not ready yet. It needs to percolate some more. I'm like,
Yeah.
like we talked earlier, you only have so much time to do stuff. And if you just kind of sit and wait, you might not ever get your chance to get your thing done.
And the problem with letting things percolate is that if you let it percolate for too long, it burns and it becomes bitter.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, I appreciate the chat today. I want to give you a minute now to plug where we can keep up with stuff coming from you, where we can hear all these awesome announcements and stuff coming up that we can't talk about yet. Where can we follow you?
Well, the main page is jamaligle.com, and that will lead you to all my socials. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on Threads, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Instagram as Jamal Igle Comics, all one word. Um, I'm not. I have a Twitter page, but I don't actively post on Twitter anymore. So it's just up. But I will still, if you message me, I will still respond. But yeah, those are the main places you can catch me.
Right on. And I get that with Twitter. I don't post much there either. I just kind of use it to scroll and like
Yeah.
you said, message. That's pretty much all I do with it now. So I get that. Cool. All right. Well, to follow us, to find this interview and all sorts of other interviews, make sure you check out our website, geek-network.com. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at GeeksAZ, Geek Network on Facebook. You can follow this show, Fueled by Weird, on Instagram, just at Fueled by Weird. Follow Geek Network Media. You can find this podcast and all the other podcasts in our little family. Kind of keep up to date with all of them. The music for this show is from the band Polygon Horizon. They're a great band. Go check them out on Bandcamp. The logos for the show are done by my friends Chris Chandler and Mike Belcher. Another couple of great comic book guys. Go follow them on all the socials. And if you like the show, please leave a review and tell your friends, because word of mouth is our friend. And remember, kids, to embrace the things that fuel your weird and always geek responsibly. Jamal, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chris.